Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in this world. Welcome to our webinar, The Insecurity of Network Printers, produced by Government Technology. My name is Harold Tuck. I'm a Senior Fellow for Government Technology and a retired Chief Information Officer for the County of San Diego in California. I'd like to share just a few announcements before we begin our webinar. This webinar is designed to be interactive. So please participate with us with question and answers by using that portion of the slides. All you need to do is just type your question in the Q&A text box area on the lower left-hand side of the console and then click Submit. And you can send in multiple questions. If you would like to download a PDF of the slides for this presentation, you can do so by clicking the Slides widget at the bottom of the console. Also, during today's webinar, you'll be able to connect with your peers via LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Please use hashtag GovTechLive to connect with your peers across the Government Technology platform via Twitter. A recording of this presentation will be emailed to all of you within 48 hours. You can use this recording for future references or feel free to pass along to some colleagues who were not able to join us today. At the close of the webinar, we encourage you to complete a brief survey about the presentation. We'd like to hear what you think. If you're unable to stay with us for the entire webinar, but would like to complete the survey as much as you're able to, please click the red survey widget at the bottom of the screen to launch the survey. Otherwise, it will pop up once the webinar concludes. At this time, we recommend that you disable all your pop-up blockers. And if you are experiencing any media player issues or have any other problems, please visit our Webcast help guide by clicking the Help button on the bottom of the console. I am joined today by two very distinguished individuals, and let me introduce them in more detail. And the order of introduction is also the order of them speaking. First is Dr. Larry Ponemon. He is the chairman and founder of the Ponemon Institute, a research think tank dedicated to advancing privacy and data protection services and practices. Dr. Ponemon is considered a pioneer in privacy auditing and the Responsible Information Management, or RIM, framework. Ponemon Institute conducts independent research, educates leaders from the private and public sectors, and verifies the privacy and data protection practices of these organizations and in various industries. In addition to the Institute activities, Dr. Ponemon is also an adjunct professor for ethics and privacy at Carnegie Mellon University CIO Institute. He is a fellow of the Center for Government Innovation of the Unisys Corporation. Dr. Ponemon earned his PhD at Union College in Schenectady, New York. He has a master's degree from Harvard in Cambridge and attended the doctoral programs in systems sciences at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He earned his bachelor's with the highest distinction from the University of Arizona in Tucson. He's also a CPA. We'll also learn what he does in his spare time when he does his presentation. Welcome, Dr. Ponemon. You're welcome. Following his presentation would be Mr. Michael Howard. He's a Chief Security Advisor for HP Incorporated, or HP Inc. In his role as Chief Security Advisor and Practice Manager at HP, Michael leads a worldwide team of security professionals that supports HP's growth around enterprise print security and business solutions. In this role, his team educates and evaluates risk through security audits and support customers in creating comprehensive security policies to protect their printing environment while increasing the effectiveness of business solutions in a secure way. Michael also provides leadership working with the HP security business units and labs, providing guidance around future development to ensure HP's leadership role in security is always maintained. Prior to doing this work at HP, Michael was a worldwide security consultant with HP, helping companies on development of security output management and workflow solutions to increase the effectiveness of their business solutions in their respective environments. Michael began his career in security and high technology in 1981 when he was with the U.S. Navy as a cryptologist. So he's one of those guys you'd like to play games with or get his Game of Thrones theories, I'm sure. So Michael, welcome, and we're happy to have you. As you all can see, we have a very full agenda, and I'm going to frame the conversation, followed by Dr. Poneman, who will be followed by Mr. Howard, and then we will go into our question and answers. So as you notice, the topic was the insecurity of network printers. And I'm wondering, when you get a survey or when you receive surveys, do you fill them out? Do you give it some thought? Are you meticulous in your response? Because you're going to hear survey results from individuals who took the time to respond. I suggest those of you in executive roles, in any role, please take surveys seriously because you never know when they're going to be presented in a webinar. More importantly, though, are you in tune with your network security risk? Are you sure you're staying up to date with it? Are your printers of security issues to you, or are they out of mind, out of sight? That's the 800-pound discussion that you cannot avoid. You need to know your security vulnerabilities, and you need to have those conversations with your security officer frequently. You may think it's boring, but it's not. Preventive security is what you really want to shoot for. It's really what you want to have as your launching pad. However, people do, the slide seemed to skip, but people do get in. And how do you handle that post-intrusion attacker? Do you even have the ability to know and find that person? We'll hear things about that today in the presentations. And also, do you have security policies and protocols in place that the organization is aware of? And are you updating them on a frequent basis? Because things change, and so should your policies and protocols. Dr. Poneman, welcome. We're very interested to hear about your survey and your institute further. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Harold. I want to tell the audience they're having some trouble here with the slides on my end. But what I'll do is I'll basically advance the slides, and hopefully you guys are able to see the various during my talking head presentation. Now I'm on the speaker slide. Is that what you're looking at right now?
Yes, that's what we should be seeing. And so just click the button to the right. Any problems, just say next slide, and someone else in the back will do it.
Oh, super. Well, again, I apologize to the audience. I don't know what it is. I think I have the Murphy's Law for technology, or during webinars only. Okay, so the title of the presentation, by the way, is entitled The Insecurity of Network-Connected Printers, and this research was sponsored by HP, Inc., and it's a labor of love. It was conducted in all regions of the world, North America, India, Asia-Pacific, America, and Mexico. So we really feel very, very good about this study. It's about a half year old, so it's relatively current, and the feedback we received has been enormous. So just to let you know that I'm going to be a talking head. Everything I'm talking to you about is available in a wonderful research report. So you could sit back, relax, don't get nervous, just follow the slides, and we'll be in good shape. And I don't want to take too much time because I know my colleague and friend Michael has a lot to say. And by the way, Michael, I'm also a Navy veteran, so really cool stuff. Thank you. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the problem of insecure printers from the CISO's perspective. The research findings in general talk about people-related issues as well as inherent technology problems or printer insecurity. So we'll talk a little bit about the issues that have been identified by our distinguished respondents to the study, and we'll also talk a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the potential issues that can be overcome. So there's a lot to do here, a lot of data points to share, and I'm going to just move through this pretty quickly. This particular slide are attributions or statements that are graded from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And these statements are evaluated basically from the agreement side of the scale, strongly agree and agree. So we'll talk about each of these statements because I think they have a profound meaning, if you will, in the context of insecurity in printers. My organization assigns higher data risk to desktop and laptop computers and printers. 64% believe that to be true or agree. My organization is unable to prevent the loss of data contained in printer memory and or printer hard copy documents. 62% believe that to be true. Most employees in my organization do not see printers as an area of high data security risk. That's troubling here. 56% believe that to be true. And information contained in printer memory is thoroughly wiped clean during the disposal or refurbishment process. Only 38% believe that's true. In other words, 62% do not believe that statement to be true. So what is it telling us? It is telling us that the majority of people think and see this as a potential problem, the insecurity of printers. Okay, we have a lot more to cover, but thank you for following along. Where is the highest risk based on the type of data generated and or printed? We basically asked people a question, gave them a laundry list of different functional areas, and they were permitted 3 responses. And the number 1 response, those darn executives, executive management, followed by sales, followed by human resources, then finance and accounting, marketing, information technology, communications and public relations, procurement, manufacturing, and now we get to the small numbers, logistics, legal and compliance, and research and development. Now, basically, legal and compliance, you're saying, wait a second, that's pretty high-risk stuff, especially legal, attorney-client privilege documents. But I think the reason for these ratings being low on legal and compliance is simply that because it has to be secure, it probably is more secure and therefore a potentially lower risk. Didn't make the top 3. So the next slide is where is the highest risk because of now poor printer-related security practices, not about the technology aspects, but just general, the human factor, good people who do stupid things around printers. And basically here what rises to the occasion is not the executive management issue, but sales, then the human resources, marketing, procurement, manufacturing, in the middle of the pack, executive management. So the list does vary a little bit based on the issue, whether it's an inherent problem within the printer or it's a problem because of poor security practices, like just leaving a confidential document in the printer. Okay, moving right along. Does your organization's security policy explicitly apply to the security of network-connected printers? And the answer should be, as we all, I think, would agree, yes, right? Of course. The yes response is 44%. That's not particularly high. The no response, of course, is 47%, and 8% really didn't have a clue. They were probably drinking too much wine when they were doing the survey, so that's 8%. By the way, sometimes a glass of wine or two before a survey is a good idea. It kind of reduces the stress. I'm just joking, by the way. I don't think you should do that. Not if you're doing a Poneman study. Okay, so what are the steps taken to secure printers, including printer hard copy documents? Number 1 at 49%. And by the way, respondents were given more than one response here, so it adds up to a number much larger than 100%. So enforcing the policy, number 1. Training employees. Training is a big deal here. Shredding documents in each office area. Collecting documents from each office area for centralized shredding. Deploying digital certificates and encryption when printing access network devices. I'm sorry, a little bit of a typo there. Collecting paper documents from outside contractors for safe disposal. And then we get into small numbers. So these are just some of the steps that organizations could take to secure their printers, and basically it's not just about securing the memory, the actual technology-related issues, but it's also all of those practices, that we need to adhere to. And now the next slide is a killer to explain. First, it looks like the American flag, so it's very patriotic. And this particular slide, we ask our respondents to grade how well is your organization able to govern the use and protection of printers? In other words, how good are they? And so we ask people to grade themselves, which is always dangerous because most people who grade themselves tend to grade with a little bit of grade inflation. In other words, you're a B-level student, and your accounting professor says you can give yourself an A if you think you deserve it. Most people would say, yeah, I'll take the A. And a few people might say, I'll stick with the B because I didn't earn the A, but that's called a halo effect, and that does happen quite a bit in research. So we ask people to grade. Keep in mind that the grade is probably inflated, so we look at the excellent and good response, the A and B response, and then we also compare that to the not performed. In other words, these particular good steps for governance are not being done. And if you kind of look at these numbers, it's kind of interesting, like educate users about the safe and secure use of printers and other peripheral devices. 42% grade themselves as good or excellent or good. 40% are not doing it at all. Establish monitoring procedures to track the use and physical location of printers. 32% kind of rate themselves high, and not being performed is at 52%. So you notice that the not being performed really gets to be pretty large, like 77% on things like integrating printer access and use with network intelligence and or SIM solutions. Second from the bottom, establishing and enforcing printer security policies that are consistently applied across the enterprise. 66% say that nope, it's not being done. And here's an important one: encrypt data in motion across the organization. A fleet of printers. 62% say nope, it's not being done, and you can see the rest. So the fact that the red bar is longer and the blue bar tells me that a lot of these really good ideas and suggestions for improving governance around printer security just not being done. Now, I know people have lots to do in security, and this is just one more thing to focus on, but this could be a big problem in the world of data breach if you don't manage the risk. Okay, I'm getting off my soapbox now. I'm getting back to being a researcher. Does your organization have a process for identifying and restricting access to high-risk printers? And the answer is, well, we look at yes and no here, okay? So the answer is identifying high-risk printers at 30%, and no response is 70%. Okay, not good. Restricting access to high-risk printers, including printed hard copy documents. 34% say yes, 66% say no. So the no's outwin the yeses, which is not a good fact. We want to see more yeses than no's. Okay, now our next slide looks at the percentage of insecure printers, and they're insecure because of unauthorized access to data stored in printer memory. And we ask the question, approximately how many of your printers kind of fall into this category. It's an extrapolated value of about 44%. And this just lays out the distribution from none, that means no printers at all, to 6% saying all printers basically would fall victim to this particular problem. So anyway, just get one more fact that suggests that we have a problem. Now that's for the printer memory. Now we're going to ask the same question, but we're looking at it from the perspective of practices around the printer, unauthorized access to printer hard copy documents, for example. And here the extrapolated value is 55% of printers kind of fall into that category. So it's a little bit higher. It's skewed also to the right. In other words, higher numbers and higher percentages. So again, another a factoid that suggests that we have a problem. Okay, more problems. There might be some positives here. I know Michael will handle the positives. I'm kind of the negative guy. So now we're looking at data breaches involving a network-connected printer or desktop computer. And the blue is, has your organization experienced a data breach involving a network-connected printer? And then the red, has your organization experienced a data breach involving a desktop or a laptop computer? And we're comparing a laptop and desktop because, in some ways there's a lot of similarity to a printer. A printer is a computer. And so obviously you would think that there would be parallels between the two. The yes response is yes with certainty. 35% of those on the laptop side or desktop side said they did. Only 10% on the printer side. On the yes, we're very likely, it's close to being tied, 23 and 24%. On the yes likely here, we get a much higher for the printer than desktop, laptop, computer. And then the no is almost tied and then unable to determine, again, for those people that were relaxing too much during the survey process. So this tells us that, again, we're probably attaching more concern around the security of laptops and desktops than printers, which, is not a good idea. They're all equally bad or potentially a problem for the organization, not bad. Okay, lots of data points, I know, but we'll get through it. Do you predict an increase in the risk of a data breach over time? And so here we're looking at increased risk, and this is the blue, over the next 12 months resulting from insecure network-connected printers, and then the red is an increased risk over the next 12 months from insecure desktop and laptop computers. And here we get close results that are pretty close. The yes response for printers is risk increasing is 57% versus 51% for desktops and laptops. So the risk is increasing, and they're similar, but printers are viewed as increasing at a higher rate. That's why 57 to 51% on the yes response is how I'm defining that. Okay. The next slide is why will the risk increase? What are the factors that cause the risk? And here, the respondents were given 3 top choices from a list. And number 1, the expanded use of mobile technologies, increased rate of malware infection, increase in the number of remote workers, more network-connected printers, increased user access, increased sophistication of malware, greater data security capacity, and newer emerging data protection regulations. Those darn compliance requirements are on the increase. So these are the reasons why we see this risk is increasing, according to our respondents. Okay, now we're going to look at critical success factors. What are some of the critical success factors for implementing controls over printers? So we asked people to select from a laundry list, which is actually longer than the list we present here, and they got to choose the top 5, And so we basically looking at number 1, technologies that help pinpoint high-risk printers, such as those containing malware. That would be a critical success factor if you have that technology. Monitoring of devices and users. Number 3, technologies that encrypt sensitive or confidential documents contained in the printers. Number 4, technologies that restrict access to documents contained in printer memory. Number 5, employee awareness and training on printer handling. And strict enforcement of noncompliance, access rights assigned using role or function-based methods, ample budget. You need money to do this too. Clear, concise, and consistent printer security policies, executive level support, and others. So there are lots of factors, but the top 3, technology, and then being a good steward by monitoring devices and users, and then using encryption whenever it's possible or available to you. The cryptologist, I'm sure Michael loves encryption. I was also a cryptologist, that's why I know that. Okay. What are the features that help manage and secure printers and printed hard copy documents? Now here we're looking at each of these using an attribution, again, similar to what we did before, but we're looking at a very important and important response. The full scale is very important, important, not important, and irrelevant. So we're really just looking at the important side of that scale. So features that help manage and secure printers, ability to spot, pinpoint anomalies on any given device when within the fleet of printers. Okay, ability to manage security protocols for the entire fleet of printers from one central console. The ability to set and monitor policies for the entire fleet. The ability to configure printers to be compliant with specific corporate security policies. The ability to enable encrypted communication among devices across the fleet. The ability to determine printers that are added or removed from the network. That's really important. And the ability to install and manage digital certificates across the fleet of printers. So these are all very high percentages, which means that all of these features are viewed as very, very important. Very boring slide here. Now we're just going to talk a little for the next couple of seconds about who completed the study. Our sample size, remember we conducted this in 4 global regions. I don't recall the number of countries that are included because each region has many countries. I think it's close to 30. It's maybe like 28 or 29 countries. Okay, keep that in mind. Total returns, 2,281. We had a reject sum for reliability and screening purposes. Our final sample, over 2,000. Response rate of 3.4%. Now, again, as a researcher, you see 3.4%, and you say, is that a good response rate or not? And the norm for expert samples is about 2.7%. So it's higher than the norm, which means people found the survey interesting, and we're very delighted to see such a high response rate. The folks who completed the study range from executive vice president level, really C-level, to down to contractor. The largest segment are technicians, people who are kind of rank and file IT and IT security practitioners. But we do have a fair number of people at or above the supervisory level. In fact, if you divided the pie, added supervisor, manager, director, and executive, you would have more than half, which is a good fact. Now then, the question about industry. I love this question because I love studies that cut across industry, but unfortunately, if you basically do that and you don't stratify, you end up with very small slices of the pie, which make it very difficult to do a complete carve-out by industry. And in terms of organizational headcount, we basically have mostly larger size companies, but by design we wanted the full range, from really small companies, mom and pop size companies, to very large companies. And that's what we see here. And with that being said, here's some contact information for Poneman Institute. We'd love to hear from you. We live up here in northern Michigan, and we're very lonely, so we love getting phone calls from people who are interested in talking about our research studies. And with that being said, I will turn it over to my colleague and fellow Navy veteran, Michael.
Hi, thank you, Larry, and I'm happy to hear that you're a part of the Navy as well, so we'll have to have some good discussion around that at a later date. So welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining the call today. As I said, I'm Michael Howard, and my responsibility is a team of security advisors to really come in and help our customers design and address this problem that we have around print security. So today I'm going to go through the slides rather rapidly because I'm conscious of the time, but to make sure that we cover the material and hopefully stimulate some thought about what you need to do in your environment to address these risks around print security and really make sure that you're bringing them to the forefront of thought within your overall security policies and procedures that you're putting in place. So one of the things that we do at HP is as we're designing solutions, whether it's PCs, desktops, or printers, is we always design with security in mind as number one. We also are looking to design for cyber resilience, which simply means that we want to make sure that all the solutions we're putting in place around printing are something that not only help you detect and protect your environment, but how do you recover in your environment in a very transparent way to the users so that you keep these important devices available in the highest availability that you possibly can. So as we look at some of the trends that are driving it, we do know that cybercrime is up. In my career in security, I've never seen the threat landscape at a level that it is today. And so this makes it really important for us as security professionals to make sure that we're addressing all endpoint security and everything that's touching networks. The days of just protecting yourself with a firewall are over, and now, as we say, everything that touches the network needs to be an equal citizen whenever it comes to security policies and procedures. And we've seen compliance infringements rise, and we've also seen compliance guidelines around that and new regulations grow as we see security breaches happen. So as you're looking at your print environment, it's important to look at those in the same way that you do for the rest of your IT environment for how you're mapping those governance and controls over to the business processes that you're using in printing and doing that in a very secure way. Also, one of the things that I talk to a lot of customers about, the first objections I get when I come in is that we're not worried about our printers, they're behind a firewall, they're safe and they're secure. When the reality is that 65% of security breaches that happen are from internal sources. Now, they're not necessarily malicious attacks, but still a lot of what we do as security professionals is how do we build security policies that help protect users from themselves and help protect the internal workings of an organization. And then, of course, the reason why we're doing all of that is because we see the financial loss is at $7.7 million to resolve a security breach today on average worldwide, and we've seen that number grow substantially over the years, and we're going to continue to see it grow as we move forward. So when we look at some of the most recent security breaches, and why they happen, it's not just that people have gotten into their infrastructure and breached it. It's that once they're inside, there's been a failure of some of the governance and controls inside that protect that data. Things like not encrypting data that's laying at rest, which ends up causing the breach to be more substantial than if somebody just got into your area or got into your network and discovered that there was data out there, but it was all encrypted and it was useless to them. Also, the ways they're getting in. For the target stores, as an example, they came in through a contractor's HVAC system into the network. So again, the Internet of Things, the endpoint security becomes critical, that everything that's touching that network you must secure. And then, of course, we have one that happened in Sweden, a security breach, where they actually came in through a label printer that was open on the network. And in this case, they were able to put ransomware on the network and really disable this company from being able to do business. So in this case, in order to resolve it, since they didn't have the robust security within their environment, they had to pay the ransom to get their network back up and operating. So if we look at some of the most recent ones that happened, just 2 months ago, everybody probably saw it in the news, we saw an incident where the Black Hat community decided to attack printers to just demonstrate how open they are. And in this case, they were able to discover 29,000 printers on the network that were open, and they simply went in and were using standard administrative passwords that were defaults, and they were able to get into these printers, and they were sending hate flyers out to printing devices at 12 universities throughout the United States and into Australia. So they really were just proving how easy it was to break into a network, take over a device that's on your network, and control it. Now, granted, these devices were all outside of an internal corporate network, but the reality is if you had a disgruntled employee inside your network, they could do the exact same attacks by looking up how to do that on the internet. And so you want to make sure that you've locked that down and that you've really put in the robust policies around it. Now, Peter Kim has written extensively in the Hacker's Playbook about how it's real easy for him to probe around, find a multifunction printer, and then he knows he's into the environment. So this really becomes important that we look at all aspects of what's going on, what are the trends, and then protecting for those trends as we move forward. So why is it important on printing? I mean, I get a lot of conversations with a lot of people that it's just a printer. We're not really worried about it. But the reality is a printer today is just like having a server or a PC on your network. They have hardware. We all saw the stories a few years ago of where CBS exploited some printers that had been end-of-life and put in warehouses, and they were able to get data off the hard drive. So understanding that you want to have the same type of policies around your printing hard drives that you do around your PCs and desktops is critically important. Firmware and software is another area that we see is a really overlooked area from IT departments when it comes to updating those. And I'll give you an example. I've worked with the CIO that did a check on their network, and they found out that they had several breaches. And when we investigated into that, we found that they had not done firmware or software updates on their devices for well over 4 years, and they didn't have a robust proactive monitoring and management solution to lock those devices down to prevent that. So making sure that you keep current on firmware, making sure that you know what the security vulnerabilities are and that you've patched for those are always critically important. The reason is because just like a PC, these are connected to the internet. They can do email, they can scan, they can copy very important business data, and they're connected to your internet. And again, if they're connected to the internet, you need to have a robust security policy around them. So looking at some of the areas that the printing area, the basics that the printing area carries risk on, is number one is the BIOS and the firmware. And if I'm a hacker getting in at the BIOS level, that's an excellent area for me to exploit the network, because largely there's not software and detection tools out there to detect somebody at the BIOS level. So you want to work with a vendor that is thinking of that, and they've got protection in at the BIOS level, and they're going to make sure that before your device ever hits your network, you have it securely ready to come onto that network. Management is the next one. Printing is one of the areas where most individuals, when I go in and talk to them, they don't even have an understanding of how many devices they have out there on their network, let alone what are the basic security policies around them, and have they disabled unused protocols like FTP, Telnet, AppleTalk, any of those that are shipped with printers to make sure that the bad guys don't have an easy open window to come into. The network is the next area where we can talk about man-in-the-middle attacks if you're not encrypting the data in motion. So what we see is a lot of organizations will encrypt data in motion from PCs and desktops and standard communications, but whenever you're sending a print job, that can be sent in the clear and it's easily intercepted. And it goes on, right? The control panel can be taken over and you can really do damage to what the users are seeing as they walk up, which can be a financial loss to an organization if you don't have the right security policies. All the way down on the right side, the largest area of concern for corporations is that output tray. The highest level of security breaches that happens in printing is a simple thing to fix, which is using some type of secure printing solution, because the output tray is printing all of that critical business information, the currency of business, if you will, and it's also the recency of data. So what's coming out of that printer is a gold mine for somebody to be able to intercept and see. And we've seen many breaches where somebody has just simply looked at a printer, read information that was being printed, and then instituted some illegal stock trades based on data that they saw that they shouldn't have. And I'm guessing that everybody on the phone at some point has picked up a document out of an output tray and seen some information that they shouldn't have. So whether you report that as a security breach or whether you just go on doing your business, it is something that you should be concerned about. So let's talk a little bit about what HP is doing and what our philosophy is around designing for this. So we're designing for cyber resilience. So what we do in every solution we're developing, every piece of hardware we develop, or any services that we're developing, is we're looking at how we build security in from the ground up. And we look at how we can protect, detect, but most importantly, recover when we do have an incident that we have to fix. So you want to make sure that you have that cyber resilience built into your organization and that you can very effectively make sure that you recover whenever you do have a problem. And as we know today with the threat landscape, it's not a matter of if you have a security breach, it's a matter of when you have a security breach and how do you protect from it and make sure that you have the tools in place to minimize the damage. So as we look at some of the basics that HP has built in, we recently just announced that we have 3 new features in our devices that truly make us the world's most secure printers that you can put on your network. And the first one that we start with is Sure Start. And the way Sure Start works is this is both in all of our PCs and our desktops, as well as in our printing devices. And let me go through a little bit of how this will work. It is still the industry's first and only self-healing BIOS for PCs, desktops, and printing. So it's a very simple process, right? Whether it's an intentional malicious corruption, whether it's accidental, or whether some other event has caused the BIOS to be corrupted, if you're running Sure Start, the minute you turn that device on, it's going to interrogate that BIOS. And if there's a problem, we go to a very secure place where we have an encrypted golden copy so we can reboot that device and bring it up in a Sure Start safe way. Now, this allows you to have uninterrupted productivity. Again, this gets into the cyber resilience. We bring those devices back up, we report that out to the security teams that they've had an incident, but we make them available to the users. This is that self-healing recovery that makes it so important and critical to an organization to continue to work properly. Then if we look at, let me go back for a minute. I want to talk about the other features that we have. We also have HP Secure Whitelisting. This is where we have developed technology to help with firmware updates to make sure that if somebody has gotten in and they've made modifications to the firmware, we detect that. And again, we automatically reboot the system, we bring it up to safe firmware, and then we proceed forward. So cyber resilience gets in there again where we're making it available. And then the last one is runtime intrusion detection. And again, this is unique to HP, where we're the only ones out there that are monitoring our devices for malicious attacks constantly while they're on the network. If we detect a malicious attack happening, we immediately reboot that system, we clean it up, we report it out to the various SIM tools like ArcSight or Splunk, and we make sure that the security team is aware of what's going on. But it really doesn't stop there. I wanted to show a little bit of the ArcSight integration. It becomes critically important that you start rolling these printers into what you're doing with the rest of your SIM technology to give you a holistic view of what you're doing in your environment. It's great to have these tools running for PCs and desktops, but if you have 10,000 printers sitting on your network and they're not reporting out attacks and they're not tracking the audit logs of what's going on in your environment, you're leaving yourself open for possible attacks. And also in these devices, all of HP printers come with over 250 possible security settings, which can become a daunting task for security professionals. So one of the things that you have to remember is we have built in our solutions in a couple different ways. So in this case, with the device control, we have built in what's called instant on availability in our devices, or instant on technology. And what that means is every time one of our devices hits the network at the enterprise class, we actually announce them to the security policy server, and we can push policies down to it. So let me show you a little bit about our policy server to help you control those. So with Jet Advantage Security Manager, we can increase your security across the entire fleet. We can strengthen the compliance and the corporate security policies, and we can reduce the risks of you having a security breach. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how this works as far as the first thing you do is create that policy. And this is something that HP offers services for from my team to help you create a robust policy, or a lot of our customers have security teams and they create these themselves. So the first thing is identifying those 250 security settings. What is right in your environment that you want to lock down to make sure that you don't have open windows for people to get into? The next thing we do is add printers, right? So if you bring in a new fleet of devices, you might have a lot of printers already out there, but as you add new devices to them, you want them to automatically discover what that corporate security policy is and lock those devices down before they ever hit your network. And of course, you want to be able to assess that at any time, so you have true transparency and visibility into what's going on in your network. You know with 100% certainty that all the devices are locked down at the right level and that that's being maintained on a daily basis to make sure that you're staying in the right state. And then we get into that cyber resilience again that we've been talking about. We don't only detect that you have a problem on your network, we fix and remediate those problems and make sure that we're locking them down to the policy. So in the case that you had a printer that went down for maintenance and they did some changes to the formatter board, brought that device back up on your network, immediately Security Manager is going to find it and it's going to lock that device back down. The other thing that we do is we know that certificate management on these devices, since they all include embedded web servers, is another overlooked area. So I'm sure many of you have walked up to any of the multifunction printers out there in the industry and you see that it says a security certificate is not valid. And what we see normally is people will just hit cancel and they'll move on. In this case, we now manage those security certificates where they used to take 10 to 15 minutes per device to put it on. With Security Manager, we manage that automatically. We do the negotiation with the certificate authority, and we can get on a regular cadence of changing those certificates in the same way and the same policies that you have with your overall IT infrastructure. And then the final thing that we do is it's important to always be able to review those results. So if you have an audit coming up or an auditor coming in, or just the visibility to the security team so they know with 100% certainty that these devices are staying in the lockdown state that you want, and you can move forward with that. So this is just a view of Security Manager to give you an idea of what will happen if you run this in your environment. Of course, the chart on the left side, if you have all red, that's not a good thing. That means that you have lots of vulnerabilities out there. So your goal is to manage these 250 security settings, set a robust policy, and make sure that you're locking devices down at the level that you want. Very intuitive tool to use. If you do a setting that's going to conflict with another setting, we report that out. And all this tool has been based and created on the NIST best practices checklist and NIST recommendations for how you securely put a printer on your network. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our security advisory services, which is a new service that we're offering at HP that has become very popular. And this is the team of experts that I have, where we come in, and a lot of what we do early on is how do we educate and do risk assessments of the environment. But a lot of times, individuals at companies don't know the risks around printing first, so we do a good job of making sure that we educate everybody around that, and then do that risk assessment and give them an idea of where they're at today, and then help them to build policies out of where they can go through security policy guidance that we give, and then also solution recommendations and a roadmap so that we can help get them to the secure state that they want to obtain. And as we do these, a lot of this is regulatory compliance. We follow all the industry best practices, and we're linking the governance and regulation compliance control points back to the printing so that that gives the security team the exact same visibility to how they're locking these devices down that they see with the rest of their network. So some of the controls of the examples that we look at, of course, is logical access, governance. Physical security is important for certain types of printing that you might be doing. Asset management is always a huge one. Knowing where the devices are, knowing what the models are, having a clear understanding of what the firmware is on those devices, and so make sure that you're not introducing a vulnerability into your environment. And as you can see, I won't go through all the focus areas, but we're very extensive in how we review the results of these and make sure that we're helping customers put in good, stringent security policies within their environment. So just a little view of what our output report would be. We provide the customers with the top 3 areas of something that they should take away and immediately secure. And then we build a clear roadmap, which really looks at starting out with securing your infrastructure, looking at business enablement tools around your printing, like secure mobility, secure workflow, secure printing solutions that you can build into your roadmap and eventually get yourself to a very secure state as you move through this journey. So just giving some of the baseline scores, one of the things that we do is we come in and using industry guidance, we actually measure you on where you're at today and where we want to get you to make sure that you're the best in the industry within your industry and your environment. And then also security auditing reports and executive summary. So of course we roll this all up into an executive summary so that we can really help educate on where we're going to the executives and they get that clear understanding of why printer security is so important. Now I'm going to go through these last ones very quickly just to show you the control points that we're doing. A lot of this one was logging for security incidents is not in place for the printing environment. That happens to be a violation of HIPAA controls and many other controls, PCI, ISO 27001. So we address that to make sure we're helping give customers the right guidance on how you lock these down. The after state is once we've enabled that logging, this gives you that authentication, leveraging the printer security log or syslogs so that you know what's going on in the environment, you know who's doing what in your network, and you don't have vulnerabilities out there. And just a quote that we have, we are really getting a lot of praise for major corporations that we're doing this at, that this is an excellent example of how we scored and rate HP on bringing innovation and new technology into us. We are going to continue to drive to be the security leader. We set the standards for what print security and PC and desktop security should be, and we're going to continue to drive that as a security company as we move forward in the future. So just to give you a little bit of a roadmap of where we've been doing security for a number of years, and as I said, this is something that's critically important to HP, and we feel like we want to continue to drive this and help our customers to make sure that they have the best policies in place as they move forward through the innovation that we're doing. So as I prepare to wrap here, I just want to let you know that if you have concerns around this, breathe easy. HP has the experts. We can bring those into bear, and we can help you with print security, which may be an area that is just not as well known to you as is what you want. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Harold, and we'll open it up for questions and answers.
Michael, thank you very much. That was very informative, and I'm sure that the attendees will have plenty of questions for you and Dr. Potamon. But before we get to the first question, let me simply state that within the next 48 hours, Government Technology will be providing the attendees a link to this presentation, a recording of it, and you can use it for your future reference and share with your colleagues if you choose to do so. So let's get to the first question, and it's from Rodney, and I think he's responding to something you may have said in your presentation, Michael, if my memory is correct. He states, you say in today's world, simply having a firewall placed between your network and the outside world isn't enough. What are some of the suggestions to better the security for the organization's network? In other words, what best practices could you recommend?
Yeah, so that's where, number one, it's really reviewing your entire infrastructure and understanding all the endpoints that are touching your network, and then looking at what robust policies you can put on those endpoints individually. And so by that means, you're really getting that defense in-depth look at it. So you have a firewall that's blocking most of the attacks from getting in, but if one does get through, then you have it compartmentalized to where each one of those endpoints has its own security in there. You've got your encryption policies in place, and so if somebody does get into your network, the damage that they can do is minimized greatly. So it's really a matter of building a great defense in depth and looking at all aspects of what you're doing at your corporation and touching everything that's out there.
Well, in continuing this conversation with you, Michael, you talked about network-connected printers, of course, and having them breached and the concerns and security. That's obviously what we're talking about today. But you did touch on your presentation regarding you can't be negligent about the security, my words, not yours, that reside in-house. So in your experiences, can you share with the audience any horror stories you've heard about the breach really came from disgruntled employees or negligence or lack of training or what have you, and really not a hacker?
Yeah, we've actually seen disgruntled employees at companies, and I'll give you an example that is slightly amusing, but it was very much an irritant to the organization. They had a work layoff program, and as they did not have their printers secured. So on the way out the door, one of the individuals went into the devices. They disabled them from doing all the features except printing, and they were able to turn it on to every time somebody printed a document, it printed 100 copies of it. Now, that may not sound like a big deal at the time, but they proved that they were able to get into their network. And it took the IT department a lot of man hours to go back in and get these devices configured in the way they wanted to so they could move forward. We've also seen breaches, like I was talking about earlier, just as simple as a document laying in an output tray. We saw some insider trading that has occurred at a major financial institution just based on somebody sitting next to a printer and looking at data that was being printed out of it. And as I said, everybody has seen confidential data in a printer. In this case, the person acted on it, and it resulted in over $700 million or $7 million of illegal stock trading, which is not good for the company. It certainly wasn't good for the individual.
No, I certainly understand that. Dr. Ponemon, I have a question for you. You talked in depth about the survey that you presented today. How do you convince the attendees, or what should the attendees take away from all that material? Because they say, oh, you know, I don't know who those people are, I didn't take the survey, and I don't have that problem. Why should they take your results seriously?
Well, it's a good question because that applies to all research. You know, we are very careful in the work that we do. We basically are impartial. So when we design a survey, we're not looking to lead the witness. You know, I want people to reach a conclusion based on their knowledge and expertise. We're also very careful in selecting folks who respond to Ponemon studies. If you look at our crown jewel, of all the things that we do as a research company in the security community, it's basically our sampling frame of IT and IT security practitioners. So the bottom line is if you do all of the above, the research tells you the issues that are most germane to people, and that basically it also helps you understand the risk areas, the minefields, if you will, that, for example, the stuff that Michael was talking about. So we think the research will be important to people in general who have some responsibility or connection to printer security. We hope to do this again. This is the first year of the Insecure Printers study, but I think we might want to schedule this as an annual report.
If you do it annually or some frequency to be determined, are the surveys more valid by surveying the same companies, same industries, or does it matter?
A great question, by the way. So, if you have trend data, that's very valuable because it helps you understand not just where you are, but where you're heading. And also by having more than 1 year of data, it's a good reliability check because you expect change, but you don't expect such gigantic change. And so if your research is not tight, you basically have a problem when you compare it against prior years. So we love trend studies, and I think this is a trend that hopefully we'll see, and the trend might be positive. As I engage people like Michael and you, Harold, the world can improve, and the trend might be up. Or unfortunately, some have argued that insecure printers and insecurity issues and attacks and all of these stories that we hear about, it's actually going to get worse before it gets better. But ultimately, it'll get better.
Well, this is a question for me. From my previous role as Chief Information Officer of a very large urban and rural county, I felt at times I was inundated by vendors telling me they had the next best thing. And on the other end, I go to a lot of industry conferences and meetings, and you hear the next whiz-bang thing that's happening in technology. And so as I retired, there was a lot of predictions of the Internet of Things. Everything was going to be connected to a network. Not just printers, but buildings, environmental controls. It sounded very exciting. Now I'm moderating a security or the insecurity of just the printers. I shudder to think if people could take control of the network and start turning on and off environmental sensors in public buildings while the public is transacting business. Help me feel comfortable, or are you going to frighten me some more, Dr. Panamon?
Well, unfortunately, the research that we've done over now for more than 14 years suggests that the problems, we're getting better from a security perspective. We're doing more and better things. We have tools that are just brilliant. There are smart people with great credentials. That's all good. But on the other side of the coin, the bad guys are getting better, stealthier, faster, smarter. And it's that old adage, they only have to win one time out of 100. We have to make sure that 100% of the time these guys aren't accessing confidential information, intellectual property, or damaging our infrastructure and all of that bad stuff. So I think as we look at the world and disruptive technologies and all of these things that can create insecurity, things are a mess. But there's potential to get better because I think ultimately what happens is we have a problem. There's an economic opportunity for great companies to invent, create new solutions, and some of these solutions that I'm aware of, the emerging technologies are just brilliant and have potential to reduce a significant amount of risk. That's why I feel like even if things get worse, it's going to get better ultimately in the end.
Well, thank you, sir. And so, Michael, I'm going to give you the last question, but it's going to be slightly unfair. You got 30 seconds. What does HP Inc. has to offer that's different from your competition?
Well, we are certainly the leaders. So to start with our world's most secure printers and those three features, you won't find that in any of our competitors' printers. The security manager, the proactive security monitoring tool that we have, again, that is an HP-only tool at this point. So we always try and make sure that we're watching the industry very closely and we're leading out on innovation around security so we can stay ahead of what's happening. So that's one of the huge investments that HP makes is around security to make sure that we're always maintaining our leadership and that we have our fingers on the pulse of what the changes need to be.
Thank you very much. I want to be respectful of our 1 hour commitment to our attendees. So I'm going to wrap it up right now. In closing, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. A big thank you to our featured speakers, Dr. Larry Panamon and Mr. Michael Howard. Thank you, gentlemen. And a special thanks to our sponsor, Hewlett-Packard Incorporated, for enabling us to bring this worthwhile discussion to you today. Thanks once again, and we look forward to seeing you at a future government technology event.
Thank you.